Hello, this is Perry Freeman again. This is Cop Faxx, Zebra 56 LLC. This will be the second in the condensed Academy lesson plans that I'm presenting. You may have seen the first one, you may have seen my introduction video, but this is one I'm trying to keep your interest right up front. So this one is going to be Introduction to Criminal Investigations. Tell you a little bit about what an investigation entails. Now, our first video we talked about the criminal justice system. You have a feel for how that's set up. This plays right into that. So to get started, let's just admit that everyone, whether you're a cop or not, has an investigative instinct inside of them. We watch a TV show or we watch a movie, read a book that has some suspense to it, a crime drama, whatever, and we all automatically want to try to solve that. We're already trying to figure out who the culprit is, who done it, kind of thing. That's just normal in humanity. So you find a broken window, obviously, what do? You start thinking, well, who could have been here? Who might have witnessed this? Those kind of things, right? We all do that. So enough said there. Let's go on into how the investigative side of law enforcement came about. Again, like I said in the first lesson plan, we learned a lot from Scotland Yard. The first actual detective came out of Scotland Yard, I believe, around 1842, not too long after they formed Scotland Yard and started the Metropolitan Police Act. Now, interestingly enough, some of the Sherlock Holmes books that were written back then had a lot of detective work in them. Interesting. But here in the United States, we obviously kind of copied them again, and we started detectives. Not only patrol uniformed officers, but we started assigning people to do just investigations to relieve the patrolman or patrolwoman. Now, in the movies, in the books, TV, we always see the detective as the hero. Now, I was a detective most of my career, other than being a chief a lot of the time. And a detective does a lot of work. They do a lot of intricate follow-up work. But in reality, I would guess that around 90% of all the crimes, whether they're minor broken windows or a murder, are solved by the first arriving patrol officer. Some information that that officer observed or information that they obtained when they first arrived. So patrol, very important in the investigative process. Try to remember the word reconstruction. That's what you want to do in an investigation. You want to reconstruct what has happened. That makes sense, doesn't it? When I would be training a new officer, I would always have them write on the back of their clipboard who, what, when, where, why, and how. When you're new and you're nervous and your field training officer is looking over your shoulder and second-guessing everything that you do, sometimes you go brain dead. So I always had them write that on the back of their clipboard, so as they're taking their notes and asking questions and can't think of what to ask, if they would just peek back there and think about that who, what, when, where, why, and how, it would trigger another question. And that question would trigger another question, and so on. So that's basically what an investigation is. Once you've determined that a crime has occurred, you really have three major goals. Identifying the suspect, locating the suspect, and then providing enough evidence to prove that person's guilt. Now, social media today plays into that very well. So much stuff is on Facebook, Twitter accounts, text messages on their phones, all of those kind of things. So identifying them sometimes is easy because of social media. Locating them, same thing. And proving their guilt sometimes from those devices that they use. But you also do a lot of interviewing of maybe witnesses, associates, interviewing the suspect himself, those kind of things. So there's a lot of interviewing that goes along with it, a lot of evidence collection that goes into it. But you're working toward identifying, locating, and then obtaining enough evidence to present a case for prosecution. There's what most investigators, most police departments teach is that there's 3 eyes involved in an investigation. There's information, there's interviews, and there's instrumentation. Now, obviously, information is kind of what we've been talking about. You're going to do a lot of interviews. You're going to get all the information you can, collect stuff, interview people, locate the suspect, ID the suspect, all those things we just talked about. Interview, we used to say interview in an interrogation. We don't use the word interrogation anymore. We just continue interviewing. And of course, you have to remember that the Miranda decision plays into that. When someone is the focus of an investigation, the primary person of interest, and they're confined in some way, they don't feel that they're free to leave, and you're questioning them, they have to be given their Miranda rights. Now, of course, you've all heard those on television hundreds of times. You have a right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to have an attorney. You have a right to have an attorney present before any questions are asked. If you can't afford an attorney, one would be appointed to you by the courts. Do you understand these rights as I've advised them to you? They answer yes or no. They sign off and date and time that they received those rights. Some people may tell you to just pound sand. And that's part of the job again. But once you've got the Miranda thing out of the way, then you can continue interviewing. So interviewing and information, pretty obvious stuff. Now, instrumentation is a little bit different. Obviously, fingerprints, shoe impressions, hair fibers, autopsy results, all those kind of things would fall under instrumentation. Ballistics results done by a lab. All of that is the instrumentation stuff. So DNA has come a long ways, solving crimes every day, clearing some people who've been prosecuted and incarcerated from the past because of DNA that wasn't available when they were convicted. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what an investigation is about. It's the basics. When you get them to court, you're going to have to do a couple of things. You're going to have to show the act that a crime occurred. And this is the Latin word is reus actus, the guilty act. Something happened. And then the mental state comes into that. Mens rea is the Latin word for that. The mindset of the person of interest or the defendant. And lastly is the harm or the damage that was done. Was somebody injured? Was there money loss? Was there just damage to property? What was the harm? So you need, all 3 of those elements have to be answered and shown in court. You have to be able to show that the defendant had not only the means to commit the crime, meaning that were they in the right state? Were they in the right city? Were they in that house where it happened? Or do they have an alibi? Were they in another state and can prove it? Motive plays in a lot there also. And that gets us to the last two things we're going to talk about real quickly. And that's the two different kinds of evidence. There's direct evidence and there's circumstantial evidence. Direct evidence would be Bill watched Jim raise a gun and shoot Susie. That's direct evidence. It was witnessed. Now, on another circumstantial situation, maybe Bill sees John run into a house where Susie lives, hears a gunfire go off, hears a gun go off, and our defendant runs out of the house. That's circumstantial evidence. They had the means to commit the crime, but you'd have to prove somehow that they did commit that crime. So, it gets a little complicated. Direct evidence, circumstantial evidence, sometimes they can be the same. Maybe the bullet removed from Susie during the autopsy would match the gun that Bill carried into the house, and we prove that that gun belonged to him. That's circumstantial, not direct. So, in order to keep these videos short, I'm going to kind of wrap this one up, but that just gives you a quick overview of the introduction to basic law enforcement investigations. So, we'll continue with these. Hope that gives you a little bit of a feel for what an investigation entails. Again, this is Perry Freeman. This is Faxx. Zebra 56 LLC is my company. Hope to see you with our next lesson, and we will continue. Have a good day. Thank you.